So now you have understood something about fiscal policy. So to the fiscal policy, government use two tools. One is they can spend more. They can invest many projects, or they can cut down the tax. Then the business firm can invest more because tax cut, they get profit, they will invest. When the government tax cut, the some consumption may increase more. Not all the consumption. Tax sensitive. If the tax cut, the people may buy automobile or something sensitive for the tax cut consumption. The food and other thing will not change. So some consumption spending increase. At the same time, private investment increase. So this is active fiscal policy. Government do active, they change. But some are passive fiscal policy, the non-discretionary fiscal policy. So that is, government is not doing anything, but the tax system, our tax system create this fiscal policy, passive, automatic. So automatic stabilizer. So taxes and transfer the transfer. So government have different tax system. So when the economy grow, the real GDP increase, income increase, then tax revenue may increase government. If it is a progressive tax rate, then when the income increase, tax revenue increase more than the income, because if the percentage like that. So if it is a progressive tax rate, so when the income increase, the pay government receive more. So wealthy people pay more than low income people. So when the income increase, the for all, then so certain income higher tax. So then real income increase, then higher tax rate applied. So progressive tax. So when the real GDP increase, tax revenue increase. But when the recession, when the government do expansionary fiscal policy, so the budget will be deficit because government expenditure more than the tax revenue during the recession, budget deficit. When the contractionary period, when we produce more than full employment, the tax revenue more than the government expenditure, so budget surplus. So when the real GDP increase, if we assume government expenditure is not changing over the years, but when the real GDP increase, tax revenue increase because of progressive tax rate system or any tax rate. So when the tax revenue increase, so the people pay more tax when the real GDP increase. So when their profit decrease, then they will reduce their investment and consumption. So government is not doing anything. So government expenditure is constant, or we say over the years same. Now when the real GDP increase, tax revenue increase, the business and the consumers have to pay more, household have to pay more tax. Then they will decrease their spending, and the government and the firm will reduce investment because they are paying more tax when the economy. So automatically they will cut down the spending. So then if the income go beyond the full employment, automatically the tax system have negative effect, then they will reduce the investment and the spending. So then again they reach the equilibrium like that. So when the economy recession, so government expenditure is same, the tax revenue decrease. So again budget deficit. So if the budget deficit, the aggregate expenditure component, government expenditure minus tax is a component deficit. So that decrease. So the firm pay less tax, household pay less tax because income less. So because of tax system they pay less. So then their profit is feel they increase. So they will spend more. Budget deficit, then the real GDP will increase. Budget surplus, then tax effect negatively affect, then real GDP decrease. When the recession, they pay less tax because of less income, then they spend more or invest. So this is automatic stabilizer. So government is not doing anything. The tax system automatically do like that. Transfer payment also. When the surplus time, transfer payment decrease. Opposite. When the deficit, transfer payment increase. Government social security should increase. So this is passive fiscal policy. So the non-discretionary fiscal, but this will not enough to recover from the recession. Part of the recession can, by this non-discretionary fiscal policy or the tax system, it reduce that effect, but not totally. So the active fiscal policy, it's important. So government actively increase the expenditure or reduce the tax. Certain portion of recession over the inflationary GDP gap that can be adjusted by this automatic stabilizer, the passive fiscal policy, but not all. So government should do something. So when the government is expansionary fiscal policy or contractionary fiscal policy, it is difficult to identify because some are automatically doing, some are active. So we cannot, if automatically some are adjusting, then it is difficult to identify what is the expansionary fiscal policy, contractionary fiscal policy. So the government use standardized budget, that from that budget they can identify whether it is now expansionary fiscal policy or current contractionary fiscal policy in the economy, because part of the government expenditure, the budget deficit, budget surplus are occurring because of this passive automatic. So some are active. So we don't know now whether in the expansionary fiscal policy or contractionary fiscal policy, because some are automatic, some are active. So if we use standardized budget, we can identify. So standardized budget mean now in the graph you can see government expenditure over the year or real GDP, whatever the real GDP, government, we assume government have a certain expenditure every year. So whether GDP increase or decrease, but the tax revenue increase with the real GDP because tax rate is there. So when the real GDP increase, government tax revenue increase. So standardized budget mean now the government spending 500 million. So government expenditure 500 million. So the government budget they propose for the next year. So now next year, so every year end of the year they propose. So government expenditure 500. So next year revenue, the real GDP, then tax they are going to collect next year. So then now they plan the next year government expenditure 500 million. So the now real GDP is, if we say for the tax revenue is 550, but when the real GDP increase, the next year we receive 500. So then government expenditure and the government tax revenue same. So then zero deficit, no budget deficit. If government expenditure more than the tax revenue, then budget deficit. If the tax revenue more than the government expenditure, budget surplus. So now if the standardized budget look like that. So if we plan government expenditure this amount, so the tax revenue increase with the real GDP, then when the tax revenue become equal to the government expenditure next year, then the budget deficit is zero. So if we use this standardized budget, then we can, so there is no change in the government expenditure. No need government expenditure. No need to change government expenditure. No policy, no fiscal policy, no need, because government expenditure is 500. The tax revenue also become 500. So then government no need any fiscal policy to change the standardize the full employment GDP. So the government expenditure and tax revenue 500 at the full employment GDP. So to bring the full employment GDP, government expenditure 500 and the tax revenue also, when the full now it's in the recession below real GDP, but in the reach the full employment GDP, the tax revenue equal government expenditure. So zero budget deficit, economy is in the full employment, no need to do any fiscal policy, no need to change. So this is standardized budget. So now if you say the tax revenue, the government expenditure is same. Now at the full employment, the tax revenue is 475. So now government to reach the full employment GDP, at that point 500 million government expenditure, but tax revenue is 475. So that tax revenue curve shift down. So that is recession. So now economy is recession. So then that 25 million difference, the government expenditure and the tax revenue 470. So now budget deficit. So now it's the expansionary fiscal policy. So automatic stabilizer, it's included because the tax revenue, the curve is the increase. So if the economy now it's the GDP below the full employment, so to reach that full employment GDP, automatically the tax revenue should increase like that. So now the 25 billion difference in the government expenditure and the tax revenue at the full employment GDP, the 500 minus 475, 25 million budget deficit. So now government in the expansionary fiscal policy to reach the full employment. So from this standardized budget, we exclude the passive automatic stabilizer effect. Now we can see the economy is in the expansionary or recession. So expansionary fiscal policy should do that 25 million increase so that it may be difficult to you now understand. So yes, no, that. So now you can see, so many countries standardize budget balance. So now you see some countries are surplus. So some countries are deficit. So Japan, United Kingdom, United States. So they are to the full employment, they are to actively, government should increase their expenditure. So government should spend money to reach the full employment GDP in 2007. Some countries budget surplus. So in the fiscal policy, so you should not think budget deficit is you should not think it's a negative. So the government should spend so to reach the full employment GDP. So fiscal policy problems of time. So then the fiscal policy, there are problems. So timing problem. Because of timing problem, they could not achieve the full employment, and it takes time to recover from the recession. So first one, recognition lag. That means very difficult to identify whether economy is now in the recession. To the economist or government policymakers, it's difficult whether economy is going down or the recession start. It's difficult. So even economy expansion time also, good time also, some months the production decrease, but above the trend. But we think the production decrease like that, but it is above the long-term trend. Economy in the expansion period, but some month production decrease. Then we should not think we are in the recession. So because of that, confusing whether that decrease in the output, it's recession, whether recession start or not. It's sometimes not recession. So then it takes time to recognize whether economy going down. So then after that only the government can do fiscal policy. So this recognition lag delay the government action. And okay, now government identify the economy going down. So then government immediately cannot do any fiscal policy. So there are administration. They have to get the administration process in the government expenditure or tax cut or anything. It takes time to the cabinet to get the approval. So that administration, that takes some time. So after taking decision, we had to increase the government expenditure or reduce the tax from administration. Then if we implement, increase the government expenditure or reduce tax cut, that change the impact in the output, employment or price. It takes time. So government now increase the expenditure, but it immediately will not increase the output or reduce the employment, unemployment, or reduce the price. So it takes time. So operational lag. So then fiscal policy to affect the economy. Then there are many delay, recognition lag, administrative lag, then operation lag. That is why sometimes the policymakers prefer monetary policy. Immediately it will affect. So government can reduce the interest rate or something. Government can reduce interest rate, then private firm can invest more. So in the recession, they will cut down the interest rate. So it will immediately affect the economy. So no time lag. So this, if the interest rate decrease, the firm can borrow at the lower interest rate in the bank, so they will invest more. So, but monetary policy, not like fiscal policy, it will not have the long-term effect. So we will study monetary policy in the next class. So other one, political consideration. So when a government, they are humans, the policy maker, the government party, so they want to re-elect. So then before election, they will do many fiscal policy, government expenditure, tax cut. So they want to re-elect, then they reduce tax. So for the purpose of real. So then, but this may, then after elected, they may increase the tax. So many policies, fiscal policy involve political thing. So government, the party to be elected. So before the election, they introduce some fiscal policy. But after re-elected, then they reverse. So it will not reach the purpose. So future. So because of future policy reversal, it will not affect. So if we say if the government reduce the tax, the people will spend more, consumption will increase. But before the election, if the government tax cut, then households know in future tax will increase. Then they will, now even government reduce the tax, the household will not increase their consumption. They will save. They will, instead of increasing the consumption, they will save more. So then it will not affect in the output or real GDP in the. So because people expect. So if they think this tax cut for longer time, then their disposable income increase because of tax cut, then they will spend more, then aggregate expenditure or aggregate demand curve increase, then real GDP increase, economy expand. But if the people think it will later tax will increase, then now the current tax cut, they don't respond, they don't increase consumption, they save more. So the future policy reversal make the fiscal policy effect zero. So then if we have so provincial government, central government, like if they like not in the developed countries in USA, the state government, central, federal. So in the recession time, the central government, they increase the expenditure to stimulate the economy and produce more and reach the full employment, recover from the recession. But when the economy is down in the recession time, the state, local government, they their tax revenue, they spend less. Their expenditure decrease. They don't want to increase their expenditure. So central government, to stimulate the economy, they increase the expenditure, but local government, state government, they decrease. So then the total expenditure will not change much. So opposite the local government do. But then their revenue, the local government, state revenue, because of recession, their revenue is less. Then they will not spend more. They reduce the expenditure and they increase the tax to, then only they can provide some services or public services. So opposite to the central government. So because they manage within their revenue, tax revenue and expenditure. So then offsetting. The central government to stimulate the economy, the local government, state government negatively doing opposite direction. So that other one, crowding out effect. So now the government increase their expenditure. Doing that expenditure, they should borrow from the public. So when the government increase the expenditure, then they borrow money from the households of public. So the interest rate increase. When the government expenditure increase, they borrow money from the public. So interest rate increase. If the interest rate increase, what will happen? Private investment decrease. So when the government increase their expenditure, there is a negative effect on the private investment. That is we call crowding out effect. So when the government expenditure increase, the opposite reduce the private investment. So aggregate expenditure, total spending, the economy will not increase like we expect. So there will be a crowding out effect. So we cannot expect more increase in the real GDP because that negatively affect the private. So these are the things related to fiscal policy. The public debt. So now government or so they have debt. They borrow from the money from the public and foreign also. So that is public debt. So the public part of the public debt from the government agency. So they borrow from government agency. So that is also they have to pay. Other one from the public, Sri Lanka, and foreigners. So then public debt, portion of public debt from borrowing from the government institution or agency or local citizen, not a big problem because that is transfer from public to government, then government to public. So that payment is not a big problem. But borrowing from the foreign, it's the problem of the government, the public debt. So that will affect the economy. But the local government debt from local citizen or other government institution, it's not affect the economy negative. But foreign borrowing affect because this borrowing within the country, government borrowing within the country affect the income distribution. Now government want to borrow, they sell the bond, central bank bond and treasury. So then to pay the interest for the borrowing, then again they sell the bond. So the income, then interest rate goes up. Then the wealthy people, those who have this government bond and bill, their income increase, poor people income decrease. So income transfer. So the local debt, but foreign debt affect the economy. So now you have another class, student. Hello, students.
Yes, sir.
You have another class, no? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. We will have 7 o'clock again. So I will send the link. Night 7 o'clock. Okay. Okay, students, I stop
Okay,
now.
sir.
So,
Okay, sir.
you join 7 o'clock night. Okay.